Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bass Tales. It's been a crazy week or two here. I kind of have been busy with the kids and on a family vacation, so I haven't been able to record. But it's been a crazy world out there. An assassination attempt, a step down of a president from an election, just crazy stuff happening all over. But let's get into fishing. So, what I'm going to talk about today is basically traveling and fishing, how to put the two together. It's going to be a good episode. That's what we're going to talk about. Basically, how to fish while you're traveling, set up vacations, talk about some guides and charters. I got some stories on those for you guys. And also, I just want to say some news that recently happened. An angler out of Pennsylvania, James Brittenbog, he caught the new New York State record largemouth bass. It was 12 pounds, 6 ounces, beat the old record by like a pound. And it was caught on Lake Cayuga, which is one of the Finger Lakes. So, congrats to him. And that is great to hear that are some big bass being caught up in the Northeast area. And it's good to hear. I think this is my own theory. I believe it's because of actual global warming. I'm not a crazy person. It's all go get an electric car, obviously, but there definitely is global warming happening. When I was a kid around here, the ponds would freeze. They do not freeze anymore. They haven't freezed in years. But when I was a kid, they'd freeze every year. You could go ice skating, ice fishing, and in my area, they don't. The one positive of this is not global cooling, because that would be the death of pretty much everyone. So global warming is a little better than global cooling. But my theory on the whole situation, and I'm not a scientist, that's for sure, is that could be better fishing for us up in the north, bigger fish for us up in the north. People down in the south, if you're in Florida, I think your fishing might get a little worse if it gets hotter down there, because if the water's too hot or too cold, the bass don't like it. Other fish species, I'm not sure completely how it's going to affect it, but I know if the water's too hot for like trout and stuff, that's not a good thing. So that's a thing to worry about if you're big into trout fishing. In the ocean, man, there's so many factors to that. I won't even get into that type of deal with global warming. But that's just my theory on it. The one positive is I'm seeing a lot of records up north getting broken. The one that's in my state, Massachusetts, is probably the biggest northern bass. And that largemouth bass was taken actually ice fishing, like speaking of ice, and it was basically a town over from where I live in Carver, Massachusetts. They said it was Samson's Pond, but all the locals that are from Carver, no one believes it was actually taken at that pond. There's people that say it was taken at some of the ponds around the cranberry bogs, or there's Dunham Pond that some people believe. I believe it was Mill Pond in Wareham, which is south of Carver. I just have a theory that it was that pond, just because it gets some of blueback heron and alewives that come up from the ocean in there. There's been some big fish caught in there. That's just my theory. That's another place that people think it's been. But it's kind of funny because no one thinks it was actually Samson's Pond. But who knows? Maybe it was, but even the state has it officially on the record saying that they don't believe it was caught there. So it's kind of funny, but they put it as Samson's Pond. And I've fished Samson's Pond. There are some big bass in there. I've caught in some like 4 pound, 5 pound bass in that area. So there are big bass and other big fish in there. So who knows? But it's just funny that the mass record is 15 pounds, 8 ounces. So, we need this weather to stay warmer, not hopefully get too warmer. So these big bass can hopefully grow. We'll see what happens. There's definitely some big bass. The other day, there was someone that caught a 9 pounder near me. So that's a real big bass for around here. But it'd be good to see something in the double digits taken this year in Mass. But good for that guy, James Brittenbog out of Pennsylvania, that caught the new New York State record. Congrats to him, 12 pounds, 6 ounces. So that's awesome to hear. So I just got back from a family trip. So this was why I'm doing this podcast. We stayed up the state of Maine and actually rented a house on Moose Pond through Airbnb. And it's kind of funny. My wife booked the trip. She does all that type of stuff. And Moose Pond actually holds the record for the largemouth bass. So I was all excited to get up there and do some fishing. Besides just doing our family thing, basically, we usually go camping, but we decided to rent a house this year just because camping's a lot of work with, we got a 7 and an 8 year old, and my older daughter also went too. There's a lot of work between camping and bringing everything for a week. And we also have a big German Shepherd. So there's a lot to bring camping, and we've done it for the last couple of years. We kind of got into it more after COVID, like a lot of other people and during COVID, really, just because couldn't do much else in the great state of Massachusetts. So you go up north and start camping, get out of here. Yeah. So we rented a little cabin. It was very rustic, very nice in like the woods right on Moose Pond. You'd walk down to the dock, the kids could swim there. We brought our 16-foot aluminum boat and did some water tubing with the kids and got a little fishing in. I can't get as much fishing in as I would like, but we got the kids out. Both my young daughters both caught smallmouth and small largemouth. Um, Kind of sad, but the fishing has slowed down a bit because the water was really warm up there, even in Maine. So the bass were really slow, didn't really get out at the proper times to go fishing. But we were catching definitely little small ones. The biggest one I think I caught was like 15 or 16 inches, pound and a half or something. There was nothing really special. So it was cool to fish at the pond that supposedly had the state record, but nothing that I saw that was very big. Yeah, it's definitely looks like a good spot. So I think we might even try to rent that place again next year, and maybe I'll get in actually a little more fishing. I'm trying to learn the area, and that's another thing that I want to talk about. So if you go to a new lake or pond that you're going to bring a motorboat and not like a kayak or something, you kind of got to learn. Basically, you got to learn where the ledges are, and for safety aspects, tree stumps and rocks under the water, because you don't want to blow off your lower unit or your motor. That is big money if you hit that. Worst case, you break your propeller or something like that, but that's still, you don't want that happening. So we kind of had to take it slow around there. The way this pond was set up, basically, we were in the middle section. It's almost like three sections, 11 miles long. This pond, I'd basically call it a lake because it's so big. But where you put the boat in at the boat ramp, there's like a little undersection where you can go to the northern part, but we never even got up there because I guess it's filled with boulders and tree stumps. It used to be like a logging area up there, and it's really shallow, but I guess that's where the best largemouth bass fishing is. We never really had the chance to get up in there, not with the kids and stuff. It wasn't right near the house, a little bit of a haul up there. I think next year our trolling motor kind of broke, so I got to get a new trolling motor on the boat, and I'm going to try to get up into that spot and really see if we can catch some big largemouth up there. But the middle section, they stock it with salmon and trout, and the middle section's real deep, and it's definitely the smallmouth and largemouth in there, obviously, too, but it's that's for more of the cold water fish because it's deeper. And then you go down to the southern part, you have to kind of go through this whole, they actually market really well, because I've been to ponds before. Actually, I went camping at a campground, and I can't remember, it was last year for our family trip, and we stayed right on the water in our at our campsite, and we brought the boat, and there were rocks that were like right at the water line that you could barely see, that basically you take your motor off, and they didn't mark it. I'm like surprised, because I know New Hampshire does well with marking the rocks, but Maine and Massachusetts not as much. So the locals there, I think they put out little, like used laundry detergent barrels, tied them off and anchored where these rocks were, because you had to go through this little channel basically to get to the lower part of the pond. And over there it was kind of a nice area to fish for largemouth, but I went out there one morning and it wasn't early enough. Me and the wife went out, not much for luck over there at all. We had a fish we lost right by the boat, but not that big, largemouth. But yeah, the fishing experience wasn't the best there. We actually had better the year before at that other pond that I was talking about. So that's one of the things you want to do if you rent and bring a boat to like a new lake that you never been to. You want to talk to some locals. Sometimes there's people like up here, they check for weeds at the boat ramps. Talk to them, ask them, where are the good fishing spots. Kind of funny, the lady, I'm like, hey, what's some good largemouth or smallmouth spots? She's like, you think I'm actually going to tell you? Like joking around. But, but ask them like for safety issues. Where is there rocks to worry about, stumps? So I read online anyway, so I already had kind of the idea. So she's basically like in this middle section, you'd have like pretty much not much to worry about at all. But going up north, she's like, it's very tricky with the stumps and the rocks. So it's always good to check with people before you even get there. Look online, see if you get any information, see if you get one of those topographical maps of the water, and maybe it'll have the rocks marked on there. When I went to that other pond, the guy gave me actually a little map and kind of said, hey, there's rocks here and here, and kind of circled them. So that was a big pond too, or lake. I can't remember the name of it, like I said, but when he circled it, they were like off at a couple island points and stuff like that. So you just had to be careful out there. I always watch where the other boats are going when they're flying along. So I figure it's kind of safe if I follow in those areas. So that's something to just keep in mind. We went to a local bait and tackle shop. I talked to the guy there, get a little information from him on sell him where you're fishing, give you a little info, gave him some business, bought a few little lures from him and a couple packs of worms, and got our fishing license there. In Maine, you need, if you're out of state, you need like a special, it's kind of weird because you pay for your registration for your boat in your state, but then if you're an out-of-stater and maybe even a person in Maine, you have to buy this other $45 sticker that you got to post like right by your registration sticker. So keep that in mind if you're ever going to go to the state of Maine. So you got to get this $45. It's like a launch sticker, and then also your fishing license. So if you buy like a 7-day fishing license plus that, you're looking at a good like $70. It was me and my wife, so it was a little over $100. So I spent almost 200 after I bought some lures from the guy. So, but that's good. So look for some free information on what type of lures they're hitting, where they're located, and the safety aspects, where any hazards out on the waterway that you should look for. But all in all, it was a great trip. We had a lot of fun, and it's great to get away and be with friends or family and get some fishing in. And so that's what it's about. I wanted to talk about some past fishing things in the past about traveling and fishing. So, like, I went to Laconia Bike Week up in New Hampshire, and the reason, well, let me stop before that. So, we went to another thing during COVID. We took a little trip down Airbnb to house, and it was on one of those canals down in Florida, and we stayed in the Tampa Bay area. It was actually Bradenton, Florida, and I was like, hey, there's a little channel out there. I know there's fish in those things. So at the time, I didn't have a traveling fishing rod. So I took one of my old kid rods that actually split in two and stuck that in the suitcase because I didn't want to bring one of my nicer rods and try to travel with that, because I was just going to go out there and, throw a couple things, in the evening after the kids got to bed or something. Hopefully not get eaten by an alligator, which luckily didn't happen. But I ended up catching some smaller largemouth right walked out the backyard. And if you guys ever been to Florida, there's like channels in a lot of these neighborhoods and little ponds that you can just fish right there. Because when I was a kid, I went down, and my buddy moved down to Florida, and he was, I'm trying to remember what area he was in. I think it was Fort Lauderdale, like that area. And in his backyard, everyone in Florida has these like little 1-story houses, it seems, with like a little pool that's screened in, and then your backyard there's a channel. can't swim in it or anything like that. The water isn't that clean, and there's alligators in there you got to worry about. I think the neighborhoods try to get them out of there, but you can never be sure they're not in there. So, plus snakes and everything else down there. Luckily in Mass, you don't have to worry about that stuff too much up here. There are snakes, but not like down in that area. So we took out a canoe and we went fishing down there, and I remembered that. So when I went to Florida, I brought that rod, and kind of a funny story there. My buddy Scotty, he got a treble hook in his knee while we were out fishing in the canoe. He actually knelt down, and the fishing hook got jammed pretty much in his kneecap. Oh man, that was nasty. So he ended up going to the hospital or his doctor while I was there. And we were like in 5th or 6th grade. I was young. I actually flew down by myself back in the day. It was definitely different flying. It was a lot easier. You could go, there's no security at the airports and nothing like today. And went down and visited him there, and airline travel was a lot cheaper. And I stayed at his house for a week with his family, and that's where I remember fishing in the channels down there in Florida with him in Fort Lauderdale area. Yeah, when we went down to Bradenton, I brought that rod. It was a piece of crap from when I was a kid, and still, I was throwing out. I forget what I was throwing out. I think it was just a rubber worm, and I was catching bass on it. I was like, I need to get something a little better when I get back for traveling. And I had gift cards from Christmas to Bass Pro Shops, so I went to the Bass Pro Shops by me and went over there, over in Foxborough. Kind of looked at what they had. I looked online. There's some really nice travel rods out there. Like Daiwa makes a good one, but it's like $150. It comes with the reel, and it breaks down into sections with a carrying case. And I'm like, for the fishing I'm going to be doing traveling, it ain't worth for me to spend that type of money. Now, if you're going into the woods all the time, fishing and traveling, like carrying a rod with you, that might be worth it to you. But to me, it isn't worth it. So what I picked up is this Bass Pro Power Plus graphite telescope and spinning rod. And then I also, when I was there, I looked for a cheap reel just to throw on there. And I picked up a Bass Pro Quick Draw reel. It's just a cheap 2-ball bearing spinning reel. I paid about $55, I think, for both of them. There are some combos that have the reel on the telescope and rods, and then they have the ones that do break down into different sections. There are other ones, but I just had the gift card for Bass Pro. They had one with the reel on it, and it might have been a little more money or a little less, but I kind of looked at the reel and the rod, and I was like, put these two together. I think it might be a little better for the money. I would have liked to keep it under $55, but you can't get much for under $50 nowadays. I put that fit. I had to measure it out because the ones that broke into sections, I was actually thinking about that. There's one that like Ugly Sticks makes and the Daiwa, but I needed something that would easily fit into my saddlebag on my Harley. So I had to get a telescoping style one for when I did the measurements. And I wanted to get the reel that was the smallest, so it takes up the least amount of room. So I just keep that basically in my motorcycle at this point. And then if I go like on a hike or something, I think there might be some water there, I'll throw that in a backpack. But right now it sits in my motorcycle. And when I was up there, we were staying at my cousin's house on a lake, and I was just out there. I ended up just catching a tiny little perch, actually. I didn't have too much luck, but I only got out there basically one evening because we were up there basically riding the motorcycles and just hanging out. Yeah, for what I used on the rod and reel for $55 for something just for basic travel and just like it's better than that kid's rod. That's what I'll put it. It's not the rod, what I noticed was actually more sensitive when I was getting the little bites from these perch and these sunfish, because it wasn't no bass biting, obviously, these little fish that I was casting from his dock. I could feel the little nibbles on there. So it did have some sensitivity for something that was a telescope and rod. So it's basically like 4 or 5 sections that slide into each other. It was quite sensitive, but I realized it didn't seem the cast as good as a regular rod. I wouldn't get the distance that I would expect, almost like maybe like 5 to 10 feet shorter on the cast. And then the reel wasn't that quick draw reel, wasn't the best. Like if you didn't flip the bail manually. If you use if you turn the reel so it automatically snapped the bail, like it was very rough that way. So if you don't flip the bail manually, like if you don't have that as muscle memory and remembering to do that, and you use the crank the reel to do it, you're definitely going to notice it's a little rough. Maybe it has to break in. But I didn't have too much use for it, but I would recommend it if you're not using it as like a main rod and this is just something that you're going to use here and there. It's great because you can fit it in a saddlebag on a motorcycle, a backpack easily, and get anywhere with it. Where you could have it, like I like two-piece rods. I have a two-piece Triumph St. Croix rod, and it's great. I've had it for years, and that thing is sensitive because people complain that the two-piece rods aren't that sensitive. I can't tell you. I have also a one-piece rod, not a St. Croix, but it's a Fenwick, and I think the St. Croix, and they're around the same price level, but I think St. Croix makes a little better rods. It's more sensitive than the Fenwick, but the Fenwick seems like it's a little stronger. But it's just the manufacturing, and there's all different ones. Yeah, so you can have a two-piece rod. I like them. I like having two-piece rods for traveling. When I have my kayak in the back of the truck and I have the tailgate down, because I have a cap on my truck, I can't really just put it in and like strap it that way. I have to keep the tailgate down. I'll take my two-piece rods and I'll break them apart and put them in the back seat. I'll have like my solid rods. I usually don't bring those kayak fishing because I'm worried they'll slide out the back or something. Even if I strap them down, I go down some dirt roads, gets bumpy, gets dirty. Yeah, the two-piece rods, I recommend those definitely for stuff like that where you're going to throw them in the back of your truck or traveling. But the telescoping one, if you really need something in a small space, that's the way to go. If you want something to throw into even just a backpack or a suitcase or whatever when you're traveling around, if maybe just you have a small car or whatever and throw it under the seat and you have it there. You see a place on the side of the road, you're like, hey, I want to throw something. You can stop there and throw it. And then I just have a little tiny tackle box, like a little small, basically nothing. And I just throw, basically whatever's like my couple comfort baits in there. So I'll have a couple soft plastics and a couple hard lures that I throw in there that I know they work good. So I'll bring them in that, but you can't really bring all your gear when you're traveling. So just bring what you're comfortable with and what does catch fish. A little tiny tackle box will do you good. Yeah, so that's my story on that. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about picking places for family vacation on lakes. Like I said, there's a lot of places like that you can look at Airbnb or something, or even a hotel that's near a waterway you want to fish when you're going out. If you really have kids or you're single or say kids that like to fish or a spouse that likes to fish, yeah, you can try to book your vacation around that. That's what we always try to do. We book a campsite. We book something that's on a pond or something. We booked a campsite a couple of years ago, and there was a fully stocked trout pond. So we basically walked out of our campsite, and it's just this little tiny, maybe 1 acre, like little pond, but they stocked it with rainbow trout. Me and the kids were out there. We'd go out there in the evening, and I was just throwing like a little Castmaster, and I think they had power bait on. I can't remember how many they were catching with that, but we were reeling them in left and right over there. These little stocked kids get a kick out of it. That's the good thing. I took my my daughter, actually, this is another campground that we booked and had a little stock trout pond, and it was a little bigger. It was maybe like 2 acres or something. I took her down. This is when she was 5, and she hadn't caught a fish yet. And maybe she had caught a fish, but it was still like she was just getting into it. We just got her a little rod, and she was catching trout left and right. I think she ended up catching like 6 that day. And her older sister, that was probably 7 or 6 at the time, because they're 7 and 8 now. And she caught a couple. She was a little mad because her younger sister like outfished her that day. It's just nice. So look for little spots where it's on the water or where they had like a stock pond at a campground, because the kids will get a kick out of that if they enjoy fishing. Or even if you don't have kids and you just like fishing, it's worth doing. So do a little research on wherever you're going to stay or go camping. Look at the hotel, look at the waterways around there, look at Airbnb. There's so many different campgrounds, and just traveling in general. If you travel, you have to drive a lot for work. If you're a truck driver, look for one of those little telescoping rods, put in your truck or whatever, your car, and when you see a spot you think might look good, it's good mental stress relief to get out there and just get on the water, and especially if it's while you're working, just a little break or something. It's just mentally good for you. In the past, I had a couple stories I figured I'd tell you guys today. When I was a kid, we went to Disney World, and a lot of people don't know this, but there's two ponds on Disney World that kind of connected. If you ever been there, they have like the boatways that bring you back and forth. And there's a campground there, and it's called Fort Wilderness, I think it's called, and it's like kind of a campground. They also have little like mobile home cabins, and they have a place over there where you can actually rent a fishing guide for the day, and they'll take you out, or maybe it's like 4 hours, whatever. I went, and my father and my mother were never really into fishing. My uncles were. That's how I just grew up and kind of learned a lot on my own. But my usually a lot of times your parents are into fishing. But my dad knew I liked fishing a lot. So I think I think I was in like eighth grade or ninth grade or something. They were taking my littler brother to Disney, more for him. And they basically booked this little guide trip to go out. And I think it's called Bay Lake, one of the lakes or whatever. And it was a pontoon boat. You didn't see too many of them back then because they're real popular now. I remember going, this is kind of a neat thing, because I don't even remember if I saw a pontoon boat till that time. It was kind of like kayaks. You didn't really see kayaks back then. This is probably 94, something like that, 93, maybe 92, probably 94. Well, doesn't really matter. So we went out on the pontoon boat, me, my mother, my father, and my younger brother. And the guy took us out, and I think we were fishing either shiners or rubber worms. And not rubber worms, real worms. I can't remember. The guide was kind of just doing it. We weren't fishing with artificial baits. And I remember we kind of parked as like this little like kind of island thing that's right off like where they docked the boat from Magic Kingdom. And we're out there fishing. And I caught a bunch of good largemouth for back when I was a kid. Not like huge ones. Like, go to Florida, you're thinking you're catching like 8-pound bass. It's not that way. Yeah, that's what I thought when I was younger. And then we went over to the other side, like over kind of like where the campground is, but the way back. And I remember he brought us there at the end because it kind of slowed down to where we were fishing. We were catching little ones. And my father, that never even fished, he reels in it. It was like a 5 or 6 pound largemouth, something like that. It was like the biggest one I ever saw at the time. I was like, wow. So it was a neat little trip. I don't know. Nowadays, Disney World's so expensive. I have no idea what they charge for this, but I had the Disney credit card, which I will recommend if you have young kids or are going to have kids. You can get points off this Disney card. It doesn't cost you any money. It takes a long time, but I basically got enough points from using my credit card for the last 5 or 6 years to save up, and we're actually gonna take the kids a surprise trip to Disney next March. So I'm gonna look into doing that with my kids to give them the experience I had when I was younger, because it was fun to go out in that boat and catch fish in Florida. So if you're going to Disney or anything, keep that in mind. I don't know how much it costs. I haven't looked into it, but I know Disney's real expensive nowadays. And if you're going to plan to go in a few years, think about that Disney credit card. It gives you, I think, like $1 on every 100 you spend or something. I forget exactly, but it adds up over time if you spend a lot of money on a credit card. And I'm not going to get all Dave Ramsey financial on you, but if you get a credit card, don't live off that credit card. I'm just saying, use it for stuff that you need, groceries, gas, and pay it off monthly. Don't go out and buy stuff you can't afford on it. Groceries, food, once in a while when you go out shopping, whatever. But a credit card, Pay it off monthly. Don't give them any of that money back and paying interest to them. Get those free points because you pay that off monthly, and the credit card company still makes money every time that you use that credit card. Say at Target or something. Target has to pay Visa or MasterCard. It's like 2.5%. If it's like Discover, American Express, I think it's like 3 or 3.5%. They're still making money. So they're going to still pay you those points. You're going to get those points no matter what. Don't think that you have to pay on the interest. Just pay that card off monthly, whatever your bill is. If it comes and you owe, $2,000, pay that $2,000. Don't just pay the minimum $20 or whatever they ask. You'll get so financially burdened over the years. That's why people say don't even have credit cards. But if you're financially aware and you're frugal, you'll be fine with it. Just pay it off monthly. That's just my point of financial advice for credit cards. And but you can get those free Disney points. And then there's also ones that for airlines and hotels and other stuff if you're not into Disney. But yeah, there's a little idea for you on how to get some free money towards a trip. So that was a cool trip and unexpected. It was kind of a surprise that my parents did that. And that was really cool. And I remember that. It's like an experience that you're going to remember for pretty much the rest of your life. And it wasn't even like I caught crazy big fish. It was just like, hey, cool, I'm fishing in Florida at Disney World. Like, you didn't even think you could do that. So keep that in mind. Yeah, and then me and my wife finally took our first trip away from the kids last spring. We booked she booked and I kind of just approve. Like I said, she kind of books the trips. We wanted to go somewhere warm and somewhere on the beach. She loves the ocean, loves the beach. So we ended up taking a trip to Miami. That was a nice trip. But it's funny, the night before that we were gonna go, we were gonna fly into Fort Lauderdale. All of a sudden, they had these crazy rainstorms, and this is back in April or March or whatever last year. I can't remember the exact date we were there. We went down for like 4 nights, something like that, like a kind of quick, short trip, and we got people to watch our little kids. We just wanted to get away. We hadn't been away since our honeymoon when we went to Niagara Falls years earlier. The airport floods. There was actually like 2 foot of water at the airport. The whole bottom was like flooded out at Fort Lauderdale Airport. So the night before, I'm fighting with the airline to try to get my flight at I was actually at my job that night. My wife called me and said they're canceling our flight. So what the heck? And going back and forth. It was with JetBlue. I finally got them, and last minute, I got us out a little later that next day, where we were supposed to travel and get there in the morning at Fort Lauderdale. We ended up having to reschedule, and we got to Tampa Bay in the afternoon airport. That's all we could do. I couldn't get anything closer. There was nothing flying in there or anything closer. So we get to Tampa Bay. I had to fight with the rental car company to find one. I had to cancel one. And I ended up going with Hertz, I think, because Hertz said the one I had before might have been Enterprise or something. Or Hertz. I can't remember which one, but they wouldn't let us take the rental car from the Tampa Bay airport. And then we were flying out of Fort Lauderdale airport. And they're like, oh, no, you can't do that. What do you mean? Like, it was just weird. So we had to switch around the credit card. Man, I'm losing my mind here. No, I had to switch around the rental car. I had to switch around the plane. We were lucky enough that our trip didn't get completely canceled and we lost a ton of money. We get our flight switched. So we fly into Tampa, rent our car, and then we have to drive Tampa all the way over to Miami, which if anyone that lives in Florida knows, that's not in a quick trip. I think it took us between stopping and stuff 7 hours or something. So it was annoying, but we got there. You drive from Tampa, you go by Lake Okeechobee. It's known as one of the best largemouth fishing lakes, like one of those places you should fish if you ever have the opportunity. It's probably one of the most famous fishing lakes in the United States. So We drive by that, and my wife's like, yeah, I'm going to book us a guide out there so we can go fishing. And the plus of booking a guide is if you travel, you can't really bring all your gear. You're not going to have a boat if you're traveling by plane. You could stop somewhere. You could, if you didn't have the money, rent a guide, or if you don't have money or you're younger and you just want to, throw a rod. That's where that easy little telescoping rod comes in effect, and you could fish one of those little channels down there, something like that. But my wife was cool and she rented us a guide. We get back to the hotel or talking about it that day or whatever over in right by Miami, Sunny Isles. She's like, "Oh yeah, it's some guy like Martin or something," and I'm like, "Roland Martin?" And she's like, "Yeah, I think that might be it." And I'm like, "He's like one of the most famous professional bass fishermen in the world." Yeah, so it was Roland Martin has a marina in Charleston, Florida, right on Lake Okeechobee. Never never really knew that, but I remembered watching him fish in like the Bassmasters TV show when I was a kid and Bassmasters magazine. That's how I learned a lot about bass fishing, was through those TV shows they used to have on, like the Bill Dance and the Hank Parker and the Bass. I used to love the Bass. I think they call it Bassmaster Television or something. It used to be on this network called TNN, which I think ended up becoming Spike TV or something. Whatever. So I was like, "Oh, that's cool. It's Roland Martin's Marina." We ended up going over there. I can't remember the guide's name. I had his business card somewhere, but it was like Mike B. Mike B, we'll say. I think that's what it was. But they have like 6 guides there. And it's funny because they have them like listed on the wall, like their names, 6, I think, maybe 8. And Scott Martin actually guides there. So Scott Martin's Roland Martin's son, and he's a professional Bassmaster, fisherman, bass, what do you call it, elite series, I guess, fisherman. He just won on Lake Okeechobee recently, not when I was there. But I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. He guides here. So I don't know how much he would cost to get to go out with you, but you could rent him. But it's a cool little marina. It's a cool spot. We had fun. We went out. We fished live bait. We were doing shiners. He took us out to a spot that he knew was good, because if I went out there, I wouldn't know exactly where to go. We caught some smaller largemouth, and then on the live bait, my wife caught a gar, which is wicked cool because never saw one of those. I've seen them in aquariums and stuff, but I've never seen one in person. So it was kind of neat. She caught one of those, and we caught some smaller bass. And then right at the end, we ended up switching over to artificial, and we were fishing little I think it was either like a paddle tail soft bait, or it was like a fluke style, a little white one. And I ended up nailing like a 4 or 5 pound bass at the end, which was pretty neat. It was a fun little trip to add into our little vacation away from the kids on the beach, hanging out down in Miami, going to some restaurants and hanging out at the beach down there. So it was a cool little breakup to go over to Charleston, Florida, which is a total opposite scene from Miami. So even Miami's a lot different than even Tampa. It's funny because Florida is like almost like its own country. When you move around, it's so different in different aspects. But yeah, you go out to Charleston, it feels like you're like down south, where in Miami it doesn't feel like you're down south, if you know what I mean. But yeah, they had a cool little barbecue place there, and I felt like I was in a country video or something. But it was a good, I can't remember the name of it, but it was right in Charleston there. We stopped there for lunch, and yeah, definitely recommended. So if you're ever in that area too, check out Lake Okeechobee. That's a cool place to fish. Now let's get into some stories where I've used boat charters. A boat charter is just like a guide, but usually a charter is a little bigger. They take out more than just, a couple people like a guide does, but basically the same thing. So I just call them charters. So I've had bad luck with taking charters out saltwater fishing. I don't know what it is. So a few years ago, my wife books a fishing charter out of Plymouth. This is a big size, not big, but 40 foot boat. I don't know. It's a big, charter fishing saltwater we were going deep sea fishing. She booked it for me and her father for Father's Day. Not right. That's what was the gift. I think we went out a little after Father's Day. And we were going to go out and try to catch haddock or cod or something deep sea fishing. Then we get out there. We start going out. We stop at the first place or whatever. No one's catching anything. He goes to start the motor. The friggin' motor's dead. I'm like, what, are you kidding me? We just got out there. So he's under there trying to work on the motor. He opens it up. He's in there, diesel motor, trying to mess around. Couldn't get it running. I'm like, I felt bad for the guy. He had, me, my wife, and my father-in-law, plus probably another, like, I don't know, 10 people or something. Whatever. It was a good amount. So after getting nowhere, he had to radio into Ceto, which is basically a company that gets paid. You have like a subscription or whatever, or you pay them a one-time fee. I think it's usually a subscription, and they had to tow us all the way back. So no one ended up catching any fish or doing anything that day. We were only out. Well, we actually were out probably, a good, by the time we got towed and everything, like 3 hours or whatever. So we're like, what the heck? That was bumming. The guy ended up giving us everyone their money back. I think I threw him a tip. I felt bad because we didn't get out on the water. So I have had bad luck with these saltwater fishing charters, that's for sure. So gets me to my last one. And I don't blame this guy. Stuff happens. We'll say that. Motors break down, whatever. Stuff happens. I did hear that this guy always was having problems. The boat was old. I heard later. I'm not going to say what company it was because I don't want to throw this guy under the bus. But stuff happens. The boat broke down. So do some research on these charter people, because you don't know who you're getting when it's just a random thing. You can have these great guides and charters, and then you can have these bad ones. My buddies work at this landscaping company, and they wanted to do bluefin tuna fishing. And if you guys ever seen that show Wicked Tuna, you know what I'm talking about. With these huge fish that you can catch out there, bluefin tuna, where they're worth thousands of dollars. They ship them to Japan for sushi. It's kind of a neat show. I watched it for a couple of years, but it's still on, I think. It's probably on its like 10th season or something. I was like, oh, that's cool. I never went bluefin tuna fishing. So they asked me, it was like a work thing, but I'm friends with a few of them over there. They're like, hey, you want to go? It's whatever, $100 a person. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. So we meet down in Hyannis off of Cape Cod to meet these guys. Get on the boat. It's not a big boat. We had, I think it was 5 of us. 6 of us, plus the captain, the co-captain, whatever you want to call them. So, and this was only like 24-foot center console boat. It wasn't that big, but it had 2 outboards on it. And so we started heading out of the harbor. I forget what I think is pogies or whatever that you fish with, or herring and pogies for bluefin tuna. And we're heading out. And the guy, I find out, he's not the actual owner, captain of the boat. He's like the cousin, but he's worked with the kid. So he's kind of like the backup guy because the other guy was busy that day or something. They were pretty on the young side, these guys. And hope they know what they're doing. So on the way out, they see another boat coming into the harbor, and his friends of theirs, whatever. All these fishermen know each other. And he's like, hey, you have any extra bait? Blah, blah, blah. We ran out of bait, something. He's like, oh, yeah, I have plenty. Pull over. And he's taking some out of his live well and giving it to the other guy. And I'm like, yeah, well, I hope we have enough bait to go fishing. You guys can kind of see where this is going. We get out to this spot. There's no other boats. You ever see bluefin tuna fishing? It's like wherever the fish are, they are. And where they're not there. There are big schools of them. And we're out in this spot out in Cape Cod Bay, like middle of nowhere. No other boats around, anchored up trying to fish. And we're fishing there for a few hours. And then they're like, oh, well, nothing's happening here. And we're like, yeah. And then they talk to a few people on the radio. All these guys talk, and they're like, off the point of P-Town, which is the tip of Cape Cod, people are hitting bluefin. So we're like, oh, sweet. So they take us all the way up there. That's like another 45 minutes something to get up there. And we anchor up. And it's just like that friggin' show. I'm like, holy crap, there's boats everywhere. It's like a parking lot of boats off this. It wasn't even that far, maybe a half a mile off the beach of P Town in Cape Cod. But they were there. I saw people's rods bending. And when they bend, they have to pull the anchor, and then they have to avoid hitting other people's lines and other people's boats to try to release fishing. Because if the fishing line hits someone else's line or anchor, it could tear it off. But there were fish there, and people were catching them. We're like, awesome. So we're there, and they stop pulling out the bait. This is later in the day after we were already fishing, and the friggin' bait's dead. And I'm like, that's not cool. I'm like, is the bluefin even going to hit it if it's dead? Like, I don't know that much about it, but I don't think it does. So we fished for a little bit, nothing. And we're like, what the hell? And we had this one guy, and I'm not going to say his name, but my buddies know who he is. And, yeah, he's a good guy, but he could drink. And he started drinking. He's like, oh, it's all right, buddies. Don't worry about it. No sweat that, the bait, isn't the best, blah, blah, blah. Even though, we all knew that they gave some of the bait to friggin' this other boat. Thinking that, like, what the heck, guy? You're kind of screwing us. He goes, oh, well, let's forget this place. We're not doing good here. And before we got there? I think it was before we got there. No, it was right when we started leaving there. So we pull up the anchor, we start driving. And he has the dual outboards like I talk about, like a couple 150 Yamahas or something. And all of a sudden the boat's like, the motor, one of the motors like, and like shaking and like stalls out. And I hear him talking to the co-captain because this is a small boat. I'm like sitting kind of close to him. And he's like, oh yeah, they filled up the gas before we picked up the boat, but this gauge is saying like nothing on the gas. And I know a little bit about boats and motors a little bit, and I've been on boats my whole life. And I'm like, I think you're running out of gas. That motor sounded like it was stalling from running out of gas, not like it just broke. These are like 4-stroke new Yamahas. They don't just break down like that. And he's like, no, the gauge is broken. They filled up the gas for us this morning, the guy that owns it or whatever. And I'm like, are you sure? He's like, no. But he's like, oh, we're going to go to this. We're going to keep going out to this other spot. So this is right when we're leaving the coast. We're like a mile, like I said, from the shore. And there's a gas station in P-Town, in Provincetown, right in that harbor where you can get gas. So he starts heading out to Stellwagen, which is a popular bank to fish. And there's good fishing out there. But this is far away. So we start going and going. You can't see the shore anymore. Freaking sure enough, maybe 10 minutes after the other motor stalls, the other motor stalls. I'm like, man, these kids. I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, kill all our bait, give our bait away. You don't listen to me about the gas in the motor because you believe they filled it up, even though the gas is empty. And this is a newer boat and newer motors. It's not like it's some beater that I'd be driving around in. And friggin' the guy I was talking about, we were out, putting some beers back the whole day. That's kind of what you do when you go saltwater fishing. He was all like, oh, don't worry about the bait earlier. Now he's like, these friggin' idiots, like morons. And we're all, they can hear him, obviously. We're on a 24-foot boat or 21 maybe. It wasn't big. And they're like, oh, they didn't know what to do because they knew they were idiots. And he's all losing it. We're like, shut up, man, shut up. Like, whatever. It sucks. Yeah, shut up. So there again, we anchor. He calls a buddy that was out there fishing, tows him in a little ways, and then he calls Sea Tow or whatever. We get towed into the harbor in Provincetown and get gas. And this is like the day's over at this point. So we basically went out for the whole day, got no bites, got a nothing, had crappy bait, ran out of gas, where he had the chance to probably turn around and hit the harbor and fill up. And we could have went out the Stellwagen Bank and actually got the fish and maybe caught something. But no, we ended up getting gas. And then the water got wicked choppy, like good 3-foot waves, something like that. We're heading back to Hyannis from P-Town, getting soaked in this boat because, like I said again, it's not a huge fishing boat. We're talking a center console, more of like a a recreational fishing boat, not really like a deep sea fishing boat, getting hit with waves. Like with these two guys that don't even know what they're doing, it seemed like. I'm like, wonderful. We're going to make it back. And it's getting dark. We get back to Hyannis. Luckily, everyone's safe. One guy's really pissed. The other guys, we're all pissed, but we're like, whatever. They end up not charging us. And again, we're like, oh, we feel bad. So we threw them a few bucks because they did take us out the whole friggin' day. But they gave us all our money back and a free offer to go out again, which was good on their part after they talked to the owner that was the actual captain. And they did the right thing. But this is why you got to do your research for whoever you hire as a guide or a charter, because you don't know what you're going to get. And I'll tell you one thing, my buddies went out the next year. They ended up using that free thing and they went out, and I couldn't go. I had something going on that day. I can't remember what it was, but the next year they did go out, but they didn't go bluefin fishing. They went striper fishing and they caught a ton of fish and they had a good experience the second time. And it probably was with the regular captain, not these other guys. And they did have fun, and I wished I could have went, but I couldn't go that second time. But who knows? Maybe I'm just bad luck out on these charters in the salt water, and we would have ended up sinking or some crazy stuff. Who knows? So maybe it was better I didn't go. But I just wanted to talk to you guys and tell you a little bit, thinking about vacation and taking out guides, traveling, getting out there in different situations than your familiar areas that you fish, because it makes it fun. And if you get the right guides and the right charters and you have the right gear, you stay at the right spots or travel to the right spots, you can get some fun memories in. So that's what it's about, is getting in there and having some good family and friend memories. And even the bad ones, you still remember them and you can kind of laugh at them now. And someday I do hope to get out there and actually catch a bluefin tuna. So maybe we'll try this again, me and my buddies, soon. So I just wanted to say that, look into, if you're thinking about traveling, look into some spots. Keep in mind, hey, if you really like fishing, it's a good hobby for you. You really enjoy it. Obviously, if you listen to this podcast about fishing, you most likely like it. Look into some areas that you can rent, or a guy that can take you out. Do a little research. Be safe about it. Try to get the right spot and the right guides and the right gear, and you guys will have a blast. So have a great day. It was great time telling you these stories, and I appreciate you all listening. And definitely please leave a good review, subscribe, and keep listening, and we'll have a new story within probably trying to do these. I was trying to do every week. I think I'm going to try to do at least like every other week. It's just so busy in the summer for me because I work a second shift and I have the kids with me during the day. So it's hard to really sit down and record and do these podcasts unless they're out of the area for a minute here or there when they're at camp or something like today. So I'm going to try to get a couple out a month. And guys, get out there, and it's really about getting off the podcast and actually getting out there in the fresh air and get some fishing in. So I appreciate you guys listening. You all have a great day. Go out there and catch some fish. Take care. Bye-bye.